Hey team, today I want to talk to you about the DESCO model of appropriate assertion. It comes from a book called Assert Yourself, and it's really useful to have a model like this on hand if you have to have a slightly difficult conversation, something where it might result in a bit of conflict, where it feels a little bit awkward. And I would highly suggest if you use this model, and this is it here by the way, I'll talk you through it a little bit, I'd highly suggest that what you do is you actually prepare and rehearse. You use the framework, the DESCO acronym, to write out what you plan on saying. You rehearse it, right? Go over it a few times until you feel quite confident that you know what you want to say, you know what you don't want to say, and you can land it effectively. And if you want a copy of this handout, you can just contact me. That's no worries. I can send you an electronic copy of it. The DESCO acronym is D for describe. Described what happened. E, express the impact on you. S, specify what you would like to see instead. And then C, which is what would the consequences of that be? What would be the benefit of them changing their behavior? And then the O is the okay. That's where you get verbal agreement. And that's a really important point, because you might have a conversation with someone where you're going, yes, that's solved and resolved. I've expressed what I needed from them. And actually, they might have stood there and listened to you. Maybe even they nodded. But all the time they were disagreeing with you. Maybe they were litigating in their head, and you don't know that. So it's really important that you get verbal agreement at the end. Does that work for you? Is that okay? Because then you know that they are on board with the change. Alternatively, that's where it's best to find out if there's some reason they don't agree. Rather than walking off going, ooh, all's good, and then bam, all of a sudden it happens again and you're caught off guard. So, the D in the DESCO model, describe. Be as objective as possible. Don't overlay value judgments or assume intentions or anything. Keep it really objective. Let's say, for example, I wanted to talk about, someone who interrupted me, who spoke over me before I'd finished in a team meeting. I wouldn't say something like, oh, you were incredibly rude and you don't value my opinion, so you just started speaking over me. I would stick to the facts. I'd go, before I had finished speaking, you began speaking. Right? At the team meeting. So keep it really objective. What are the facts? The E is the express the consequences. I like to focus on emotional consequences there because it's harder for people to argue with them. So if I said last week in the team meeting, you started speaking before I'd finished sharing my idea, that made me feel quite frustrated. The person can't argue with that. They can't go, nah, you didn't feel frustrated. But if I was to say, that meant people didn't really understand what I was suggesting, then the person could go, no, we got the gist, we knew what you were talking about. And that's why I like to express the emotional impact. It's just harder for people to argue with that. And then we've got the specify what you would like instead. In this example, I might say, in future, I would really appreciate it if you could let me finish speaking before you started commenting on what I said or sharing your ideas. And then what you do is you talk about the consequences of that. That's where the DESCO has a C instead of a K, eh? And that C is consequences. If you're able to do that, I would feel far less frustrated, or I would feel far happier in these meetings, or I would feel far more engaged. Whatever the consequence would be there, and then it's okay. Is that okay? Getting that verbal agreement. All right, team, the DESCO model, great one to have in your toolkit. If you have to have any of those potentially difficult conversations, you can use it in your personal life, in your professional life. The example one here is one where someone hasn't cleaned up the house with the other person. They've done it all themselves. We all get that stuff at home, eh? Great to have a model that you can use to effectively communicate. Assert yourself in an appropriate, not aggressive or overly passive manner. Get your needs met. All right, team, you got this. DESCO!